Let me tell you about a whiteboard. Iron South CrossFit, Austin, Texas. Right side of the entrance, can't miss it. 4 feet wide, magnetic, the kind that gets wiped down every morning and filled back up by the end of the day. The format is simple. Workout of the day at the top, and below that a running list of whoever posted the best times or heaviest lifts that session. Your name goes up, it stays up until someone beats it, and then their name goes up and yours either drops a slot or disappears entirely depending on how the day went. I'd been going to Iron South for 3 years when Simone Walker showed up. My name was on that board with reasonable regularity. Not always at the top. There were 2 or 3 people I'd never touch on certain movements. A guy named Brett who was built like a vending machine and lifted accordingly. A woman in her 40s named Carol who ran like she was being chased by something personal. But I held my own. I knew where I stood in the room, and I'd made my peace with it. Then, 8 months ago, Simone started coming, and within 6 weeks my name was below hers on almost every benchmark we shared. Not by a lot. That was the thing that made it stick. If she'd been blowing me out, I could have filed her under different category, different athlete, different game. But it was always close. 30 seconds on a long workout, 2 or 3 reps on an AMRAP, 5 pounds on a lift. Consistently, repeatedly, measurably, just ahead. Like she'd found my ceiling and set up camp there. My name is Theo Garland. I'm 31. I work logistics for a warehouse distribution company out in the Riverside area, and I have zero chill about a whiteboard, which is relevant information for everything that follows. For 8 months, I showed up to that gym 3, sometimes 4 times a week, and structured a meaningful portion of my training around closing a gap that I had decided, without evidence and without conversation, was a competition. Her name above mine meant something. I was going to change what it meant. She never once said a single word to me about any of it. Before I tell you what she said on a Tuesday morning after one of the hardest workouts our gym programs, and what happened after, I need you to hit like if you've ever built a whole rivalry in your head with someone who didn't know they were in it with you. Subscribe so you don't miss where this goes, and drop a comment with 1 word describing a time you were absolutely certain you understood a situation and turned out to be completely wrong. I'll start. Tuesday. I want to be honest about the 8 months because the honest version is less flattering than the one I'd been telling myself, and I think that's the point. The story I'd built about Simone went like this. She was competitive, pointed, the kind of person who tracked other people's numbers and quietly made a project of exceeding them. She'd identified me as the benchmark worth chasing, which was, if I'm being real, a somewhat ego-serving interpretation. And she'd been systematically working her way past me on every metric that mattered to me specifically. It was calculated. It was deliberate. It was, in my version of events, very much about me. I'd constructed this entire person out of a name on a whiteboard and the times next to it. The actual Simone, as far as I could tell from 8 months of sharing a gym floor, was quiet, focused, didn't talk much to anyone during workouts, nodded at people she knew, had the kind of form on a barbell squat that takes years to build and suggests someone who learned from a good coach at some point. She wrapped her hands the same way before every session. She wore the same gray tank top often enough that I'd started to think of it as her uniform. She didn't celebrate when she posted a good time, just wrote it on the board with the same expression she'd have writing anything else, capped the marker, put it back on the ledge. None of this fit the narrative I'd assigned her. I'd been aware of this inconsistency and had been ignoring it, which is something humans are genuinely gifted at. My gym friend Marcus, he's been going to Iron South for 5 years, knows everyone, operates as the unofficial social secretary of the place, said something to me about 4 months in that I filed away without properly processing. We were loading barbells after a session, and he said, casual as anything, "You know Simone always watches your form on the Olympic lifts, right? Not like she's copying, just she watches." I said something non-committal, kept loading the bar. I didn't think about it again for 4 months. That's on me. If you've ever had someone hand you a piece of information that would have changed everything and you just set it down and walked away from it, leave a comment. Because I had the answer in my hands in month 4, and I put it back on the shelf and spent 4 more months chasing a competition that wasn't what I thought it was. The Tuesday it changed was a benchmark workout called Rankle. 20-minute AMRAP, that's as many rounds as possible, of 6 deadlifts, 7 hang power cleans, and 8 front squats, all at the same weight. It's the kind of workout that sounds manageable in the brief and then reveals its actual nature around minute 7, and by minute 14 you're having a personal reckoning on a rubber mat in Austin, Texas. I finished at the 20-minute mark with a score I was reasonably satisfied with, given how the middle section had gone. I put the bar down, walked to the open stretch of floor by the back wall, and sat down on the mat with my back against the stall bars, because my legs had opinions about standing that I wasn't in a position to argue with. Simone finished about 30 seconds after me. She walked over to the same stretch of floor, not next to me exactly, a few feet over, the natural distance of 2 people who don't know each other well enough to choose proximity, but are both drawn to the same patch of open space, and sat down facing the ceiling. Her breathing was the specific kind of loud that means you went all the way to the bottom of yourself, and you're now making the climb back up. We were both just there for a minute, not talking. The gym ran its usual noise around us, people finishing up, the clang of plates, someone's music from a phone in the corner. Normal post-workout sounds. And then, without moving, without looking at me, like she was saying it to the ceiling, or maybe to no one in particular, or maybe she'd just been holding it long enough that it came out on its own. She said, "I only come here because of you." Quietly. Factually. The tone you'd use to say the sky is clear or the bars still loaded. I turned my head and looked at her. She was still looking at the ceiling. "I'm sorry," I said. "Iron South," she said. "I only started coming here because of you. I thought you should know that." Then she kept breathing, like she'd said a normal thing. I lay there on that mat for what felt like a long time, and I want to be honest that my first 3 internal responses were confusion, a strange species of alarm, and a genuine concern that I'd misheard her because my heart rate was still in a place where reliable auditory processing wasn't guaranteed. I want to ask you something before I tell you what she meant, because I've thought about this a lot since that Tuesday and I still don't have a clean answer. If someone you'd been low-key competing with for 8 months said something like that to you, out of nowhere, post-workout, on a gym floor, what would you say back? Tell me in the comments. Because what I actually said was nothing for approximately 45 seconds, which in retrospect was probably the right call, even if it wasn't a strategic one. Simone had been driving past Iron South for 2 months before she ever walked in. That's the part I keep coming back to. 2 months of driving past. She'd moved to the Austin area after what she described, plainly and without a lot of elaboration, as a bad year. The kind of bad that gets into your routines and convinces you that the version of yourself who used to do certain things doesn't live here anymore. She'd trained seriously before. She'd stopped. She'd been trying for 2 months to start again, and she kept almost walking into the gym and then not walking in. She knew what she needed to do. She just couldn't make herself do it. One evening in early October, she'd parked outside Iron South, not to go in, just to sit in her car and look at the entrance for a while, which is a thing humans do when they're trying to decide something and they've run out of ways to think about it, and they're hoping the location will make the decision for them. She sat there and she watched through the window. I was in the middle of a workout, not a good one. She described it to me accurately enough that I knew exactly which session she meant. A Thursday night in the first week of October, one of those days where everything felt heavy and nothing was connecting, and I was missing reps I shouldn't have been missing, and the whole session had a texture of quiet failure that I'd been grinding through for 50 minutes with diminishing returns. She watched me miss a rep, reset, miss it again, come down, chalk my hands, try again, get it the third time, barely. Move on to the next thing with the specific expression of someone who is not happy about how this is going and has decided to keep going anyway. She watched me finish the workout. She watched me write my time on the whiteboard. Not a time I was proud of. I remember looking at it for a second with a feeling I can only describe as reluctant acceptance, and cap the marker and put it back. And then she watched me load the bar for accessory work. She drove home. She came back the next morning. She walked in and signed up. I had been telling myself for a year that when I was ready, I'd start again, she told me, still on the mat, both of us sitting up by then, the gym quieter now. But I wasn't getting ready. I was just waiting. And I'd been thinking about it like there was some version of me that needed to exist first before I was allowed to walk in somewhere and do the work. Like I needed to already be okay. She looked at the whiteboard, our names on it, post-rankle, times next to each. You had a terrible workout and you stayed and finished it and wrote down the time, she said. You weren't ready either. You were just there anyway. I needed to see someone do that before I believed it was allowed. I'd almost left that Thursday. That's the thing I hadn't told her yet, that I told her then. I'd been in the parking lot at the 40-minute mark, legitimately considering going home, and I'd stayed because, I don't know exactly, stubbornness, the sunk cost of having already driven there, the mild embarrassment of having to explain to myself why I'd quit a workout early. Not inspiration, not some principled commitment to finishing what I started. Just the low-grade determination of a person who hadn't yet found a good enough reason to stop. She'd built a year of coming back on the foundation of that. I didn't know anyone was watching, I said. I know, she said. That's actually the part that mattered. I looked at the whiteboard then, her name and mine, her time and mine, the 8 months of margin I'd been treating as a gap to close. I'd been reading it as a competition for 8 months, and she'd been reading it as a record. Evidence that someone kept showing up. A document she could point to when her own brain made the argument for staying home. She hadn't been competing with me. She'd been using me as proof. Marcus was wiping down a pull-up rig about 20 feet away, definitely within earshot, with the focused diligence of someone pretending very hard not to be listening. When I glanced over, he caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. The nod of a man who knew something 8 months ago and had been waiting, with patience I could only call admirable, for the information to arrive on its own. I thought about what he'd said in month 4. She watches your form on the Olympic lifts. Not like she's copying, just she watches. I'd put that down and walked away from it. I didn't say that to him then, I just nodded back. Here's what I want to tell you, and I mean it without any of the performance of meaning it. I had been so focused on the margin between our names on that whiteboard that I'd missed what the whiteboard actually was. It wasn't a competition. It was a record. It said, these people came here. They did the work. They wrote down the number regardless of what the number was. That's what Simone had needed to see. Not someone winning, someone staying. I'd been staying for 3 years, out of habit and stubbornness and genuine love for something that asked a lot of me and gave back in proportion. I hadn't been doing it to inspire anyone. I hadn't known it was doing anything beyond showing up for myself. And it turned out that showing up for yourself, consistently and visibly, even on the bad Thursdays, even when you write down a time you're not proud of, that is sometimes the thing someone else needs to see before they believe they're allowed to try. I didn't know that. I couldn't have known it. Nobody told me. That's the part I keep turning over. Simone and I still train at Iron South. She still beats me on most benchmarks. The gap is smaller now on some things, larger on others, and I've stopped tracking it with the same obsessive precision because the number has stopped meaning what I thought it meant. We spot each other on heavy days. We acknowledge the whiteboard out loud sometimes. Actual trash talk, the comfortable kind that only exists between people who've stopped needing to be careful with each other. About 2 months after the rankle conversation, she brought a friend to Iron South. Late 20s, just moved to Austin, trying to get back into training after what Simone described only as a hard stretch. The friend was nervous in the way first-timers at serious gyms are nervous, too aware of the space, second-guessing where to stand, doing the mental calculation of whether she belonged there. I watched Simone with her. She didn't make it a big thing. She just stayed nearby, answered questions when they came, kept the friend in her peripheral vision without making the friend feel watched. At the end of the session, the friend posted a time on the whiteboard. Not a competitive time, just a first-day time. The kind that mostly means, I showed up. And Simone said nothing except, good. Write it down every time. That's the whole thing. I understood the chain of it then. The woman who stayed on a bad Thursday, and the woman who watched from a parking lot, and the friend who showed up nervous and wrote her time on the board because someone told her that was the whole thing. None of us were trying to start anything. We were just staying when it was hard, which is not a heroic act and is not usually the thing people write about, but is, maybe, the most transferable thing one person can show another. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to be having your best day. You just have to still be there when the 20 minutes are up, and write down the number and put the marker back. Someone might be watching. You probably won't know. Stay anyway. To everyone who made it to the end of this, thank you for staying through it, which feels like the right thing to say, given everything. If you've ever been the person in the parking lot, trying to decide, looking through a window at someone who didn't know they were being watched, this one's for you. And if you've ever stayed through a bad session on a day when leaving would have been easier, leave a comment. Tell me what workout it was, or what the situation was, or just that it happened. Because someone might have needed to see that more than you knew, and they might not have had a way to tell you. Subscribe for more stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs a reason to stay. I'll see you next time.